we have to understand these numbers to put them in the right context, but also to have a number of people accountable for what is discussed, what is implemented, but also to be, can my colleague share a screen with the slides? Good start. So we have the title. We can move to the next one. So in order to, that you know what we are going to talk about, I will have the pleasure to introduce our different panel members when we will start the discussion. And as you see in the agenda, basically, we have 4 moments in this session, a bit of introductory remarks by myself that will take, I hope, no more than a few more minutes. Then we will ask you through a quick online consultation using Mentimeter a few questions in order to have your opinion on a number of issues relating to what we discuss. And that will basically be the starter for the discussion where we are very lucky to have different actors in the field, both of climate action and capacity building, in order to see how your answer resonates with the situation they face, but also how we can improve some of the difficult situation we are in. Because this issue of capacity building, in particular for non-technical audiences, so basically people that are not negotiators, but are still very important stakeholders, is largely underfunded. And through different actions, we want to solve that. Then my colleague Joanna online will talk about how we build some of this capacity with what we do at FAO. And I reassure you, we are going to talk about emissions, okay? And finally, we will open for a Q&A with all of you. So next slide, please. So, as I've said, we actually use a number of numbers in this field of climate. First of all, in order to report emissions that started with the Kyoto Protocol and now with the Paris Agreement. So countries have taken commitments and they're reporting on their emissions. So that's the role of public authorities. But we have also more and more private actors, investors, companies that pledge to become carbon neutral, to go toward net zero. But it's quite important that we agree on how these computations are done to avoid greenwashing, I would say, in the worst case, or just a lack of results in the best case. And the issue of agriculture in particular is quite complex, much more complex than the field of energy, for instance. We know the contents of carbon of 1 ton of oil, depending where it comes from. We have different estimates, but the range is basically between 1 and 1.4 when I normalized. When you talk about agricultural products, even a liter of milk, the range is from 1 to 45 around the world across countries. And within even one country, you will see large variation. Depends on the animal. It depends how this animal is fed. It depends also what type of energy is used on the farm. So many, many parameters that actually can make the story pretty complex and will require proper approach and solution. And that's why we need actually to track different type of GHG. Agriculture, you will see NO2, methane, CH4, CO2 in particular, that have different global warming potential, that have different lifetime, and are associated with different activities. If you deal with livestock and ruminants, you will have really to know your math and how to monitor methane. When you apply fertilizer, it's going to be mainly NO2. When you burn a forest, that's going to be CO2. So we want to take into account this complexity, but not to be blocked by it. And I have said, geography matters, agroecological zone matters, practices matter. And so even for the same type of activity, we need much more precise emission factors linked to the soil, linked to the practices. And because these numbers are going to be used for accountability, potentially to enter carbon markets, to comply with some regulations, we need also to have transparent methodology. Because if a smallholder tomorrow is rewarded or punished based on his carbon performance, it's pretty important that he agree and understand how this has been done. Next slide, please. So that leads us to the fact that if we want to achieve our goals both in terms of mitigation, but also adaptation, and really when we think about agriculture, we should not differentiate these two elements too much. A lot of the proper action we do on the farm to mitigate can lead to actual adaptation benefit and vice versa. That's true when you increase your productivity in a sustainable way. That's true when you increase the carbon in your soil, and so on. So, we have these needs. The world is complex, but also the world, unfortunately, is filled with inequalities. A large company and a smallholder has not the same capacity to perform this analysis, understand these numbers. If you look about how the most advanced economies are going to monitor their emissions, they are not going to use a tier 1, that is a default option in the UNFCCC framework, but will move to tier 2 or tier 3 to better capture the innovation they have done. Basically, they want to be sure that, when possible, they don't overestimate their emission. And in a few cases, actually, they also think that they do more emission than what the default option is giving, based on the science they have, and we should acknowledge this desire of transparency. Unfortunately, for low-income countries, everyone is going to use tier 1. Independently, if you have done good action or not, you are going to revert to default option. And so we want to bridge this gap. We want also to make sure that everyone has a better access and a more equitable access to this knowledge, because behind this knowledge, there is money. There is opportunity for funding. And so if you are not well equipped in terms of knowledge, but you are going to pay the price. And today, unfortunately, it's often the most vulnerable countries and people that are missing part of this game. So now I'm going to invite you to answer a few questions through the Mentimeter. So next slide, please. So for those that have access to a phone, or a laptop, or a tablet, I invite you to scan this QR code or to go to menti.com and enter the number 7629-8436. That's going to allow you to feed our discussion and the panel with your information. So let's start with the first question. Next slide, please. So here, you can type a word, a sentence, a couple of words. Don't start to do too much literature, especially on a small keyboard. And the question is, what is the biggest hurdle to effective capacity building in this field of GHG accounting? So, one is money, the problem and the source of, the source and the remedies to all our problems. Technology, education, knowledge. So that's good. I mean, I think we already share here some of the key elements. And thanks, everyone is answering. Highly appreciated, at 5:35 p.m. after this day at COP, you are ready to answer a quiz. Thanks a lot. So we see also that language barrier, it's an interesting one because it's true that in some cases that's an important one, especially when we want to reach non-technical audience. You have guessed with my accent I am French, even if I speak English. So I can speak and read it. But in many places, in particular, even when I go to school to sometimes explain this type of things, if I come with a handbook in English, I'm going to lose my audience. And actually, that's the same thing when you talk with also high-level policymakers, So, already a nice overall picture. All this result will be shared after if you want to go back. But question of resources, motivation with political will, the need of responsibility, and overall access to knowledge. Next slide, please. So what is nice is to see that people online also answer significantly. So here you can select among a subset of actors, countries, international organization, private sector, NGO, task force, which actor you think is the best position to bridge the growing gap in technical reporting on climate mitigation. So how we deal with our emissions. So countries have to do it, but they may not even communicate, in many cases, with their own constituency on it. I've rarely seen a policymaker going in front of a journalist or his TV show to talk about his notification at COP and how they have performed. But in any case, we see that two groups here emerge, international organizations that have a mission to provide public good and to engage and bridge inequalities, and NGOs, also that want to promote more transparency. Now, to be clear, answers are between 4 and 6. I will not start to claim that the differences are statistically significant. Thank you. Next slide, please. So, in this context, and based on the information that you have, how can community, grassroots initiative, smallholders can influence climate initiative? Is it through innovative solutions that combine traditional knowledge and practices, through active engagement and local forum and community-driven initiative, or through collaboration with and contribution to the development of policies? So the knowledge, the social skill and the community are more outward looking and dealing with institutions. You can rank them. Okay, so active engagement in local fora and community-driven initiative, but not for long, because engagement with institutions and development policies has catch up, and the ranking has been multiplied again. So here also you see not one answer. I think like in the previous case, we see that different channels, different actors can contribute. And I think that really depends on where you are, what challenges and opportunity you have, and at the end, what do you want actually to change. So next slide, please. another word cloud. So what can make the most difference in effective capacity building for non-technical audience? What will be for you the game changer or the best lever? Communication, engagement, right language skills and method, and something in common to share. Can be actually the knowledge, the language, but you need to find a bridge with your audience. Okay, so next slide, please, and we are nearly finished. Do you think that women and youth be more effective in achieving climate targets? So basically more effective than men and old people. So in this case, we have a kind of clear answer. Women and youth actually can be more effective, but in a lot of projects, in a lot of experimentation that are done on the ground, that's not the scan, that are. For the youth, it's pretty obvious. I mean that they are the ones that will have to deal with most of the consequences of the climate situation. For women, there's also a number of reasons behind it. But I will have more than opportunity to let the panel talk about it based on their experience in this field. So the last question now is, overall there were $29 billion allocated to agricultural and land use projects related to climate finance. And what do you think is the amount allocated to capacity building? So we have two people that are very optimistic. But most of you have guessed the right answer, so less than 1 billion. So we are talking, broadly speaking, at actually less than 3.5% of the total envelope that go to capacity building. So, based on this, I am very happy that you have shared your insight, and I'm going to turn to the panel. I think you have all the microphones, so that's great. And I'm going to start with Sandra, if you don't mind, and I will join you. So Sandra, you are Sandra Guzman Luna. I'm going to give you your full name, and I hope I will not damage the pronunciation too much. Sandra is an international specialist in low-carbon development and climate finance, and the founder and general director of the Climate Finance Group for Latin America and the Caribbean. And I would like to hear about your experience in financing for this kind of capacity building, and also your insight on finance following the first survey question, how relevant finance is a hurdle to deliver on this effective capacity building.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and very nice to see very dear colleagues. Well, I think we have to to think about capacity building, not only to understand climate finance, but also to access climate finance. And I think the very first point when we talk about capacity building is, the very first starting point is, what is climate finance? And unfortunately, we don't necessarily have a definition of what is climate finance, but in Latin America, how we started is understanding where is the money. How can we understand these financial flows? Where is the money? How has been allocated? And particularly start connecting different entities with the climate finance discussion, because normally climate finance has been related to the role of the financial ministers, but it hasn't been as democratized with different people, different groups, and I think this is one of the elements that in GFLAG we have been trying to do, is generate knowledge about how to understand climate finance flows, what are the main sources of financial flows, how to access these financial flows, but also how to use all these flows to continue that capacity building. Capacity building is a process. It's not something that happens once and that's it. And I think this is precisely one of the challenges that we are facing, particularly in governments, because you have a government for 6 years, then these governments change, and then you have to start all over again. And this is why capacity building has to be seen as this process that is continuous, but also has different ramifications. No? You can talk, for instance, when we talk about capacity building related to climate finance, you can think about the role of, for instance, multilateral funds, and the way that multilateral funds are very different if you compare with the public expenditure. So I think capacity building is also a matter to understand this diversification of the different entities, different mechanisms, different ways to think on climate finance. But also, at the same time, one of the key elements is start working more on the transparency side, the participation and the accountability side. So when you are building capacities, and that's why it's important to think in the capacity building process, not only to understand where is the money and what are the mechanisms, but also how this will help you to understand how to access and how to use these resources. Let me tell you what we found. When we started in GFLAG, actually was an organization that was created to build capacities on climate finance, because we realized that in this context, everything is about finance. No? Like when we talk about mitigation, when we talk about adaptation, it's all about how much we need to invest in these processes. But we didn't know what type of institutions there were, what type of mechanisms there were. So we started to document all these, and then we started to develop workshops and different mechanisms to start building capacities. Not only, and we started building capacities in civil society and local groups, and then we realized that even governments need to build capacities as well. No, we kind of like assume that governments have all the information about where is the money, but it's not the case. So it's very, very important to understand not only this ecosystem, but also how to present this information out there, how to create those scenarios to really connect those mechanisms, and how to make this information accessible. Unfortunately, if you go around with the government, sometimes we don't even know what type of mechanisms have been created. No? Like sometimes we don't know what is the GCF, no? The Green Climate Fund. We don't know what is the Adaptation Fund. So this is a challenge at the international level. But even if you go at the national level, how to build capacities to understand the way that the budget works. No? And that's also climate finance, like how our governments are investing in this information. And sometimes people don't know, for instance, how the public expenditure works. And that's why I think capacity building is a cycle. It's a process, and it's a cycle, and it's something that has to happen all the time. And this is critical when we talk about climate change, because if we want to reduce emissions, we want to know what type of investments we need to do to reduce emissions, in what sectors, how much do we need, because sometimes we don't even know how much do we need to reduce those emissions or to increase capacities. And that's why capacity building is this process, this constant element that we will need. And climate finance is really important, because if you know where is the money, and you know how much do you need, then you can assess the gap that you have to close with all these mechanisms. So I would like to just emphasize that at the end of the day, capacity building is about identifying where is the money, what are your needs, what are the gaps that you have to cover all those needs, and then how can you cover them, no? Like identifying different instruments and different mechanisms related to climate finance.
Thanks a lot, Sandra. And we have here the keywords. You know, you want capacity to access finance, and this is a process. That's not just a one-shot experience of activity. And it's very, very important to have organizations like yours and actually put in place a system that can carry these activities. Now I'm going to go online to give the floor to my colleague at FAO. I just realized that I didn't introduce myself. I'm David Laborde from FAO. That is currently online. Jose is an officer in the forestry division of FAO and is responsible for promoting the development of enabling policies to strengthen the capacity of forest and farm producer organizations. Jose, you can hear me well?
Hello.
Yes, you can hear us?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. So we would like to hear about your experience regarding building a bridge between institutions and farmers to fill climate mitigation action gap. What are the most effective actors to do this based on your experience? And thanks for joining us from Rome. Yes?
Thank you, David. Hi, colleagues. I'm very happy to be here. There is a very interesting question, David, because there is a fact that achieving climate targets requires a collective action, participation of multiple stakeholders, where farmer organizations, small-scale producers play an important role. Overall, I would say that there are not necessarily more effective actors than others. Each of them play a significant role based on their expertise and kind of actions at different levels. However, I would say that by connecting with smallholders and producer organizations, there are some key elements that are needed to address in order to achieve climate targets and to address very well the needs that they have in order to scale up climate actions. Just to give a very rough examples, collectively about 90% of the more than 600 millions of farms across the planet are family-run, of which 84% are smallholders, with farmers owning even less than 2 hectares. Nevertheless, although these farmers only operate 12% of the total agricultural lands, yet they produce 35% of the fuel for human consumption. And if we bring together these smallholders, local communities, indigenous peoples, collectively, this group, they manage or own at least 4.3 billion hectares of forest and farmlands. This is huge. Nevertheless, at the same time, they are among the most vulnerable populations to climate change. They always face some challenges due to poverty, lack of access to finance, technology, and capacity development. And just by this very brief background information and regarding the question of how to bring together these institutions and bridge the gaps, I would say that there are 4 main elements that we need to address in order to bring them together and to unlock their full potential to support these climate change mitigation adaptation targets. First is to acknowledge that farmers, they are in a very disadvantaged position. And climate change mitigation should come together with livelihoods improvements. Greenhouse gases emissions policies should not come at the expense of their livelihoods. Rather, it should also come to support the livelihoods and income-generating opportunities. Otherwise, we are putting an additional burden on a group that already has too many burdens. Second, in order to bridge the gap between and to support them, government should secure their rights over land and trees and provide them adequate regulatory frameworks. We need to provide incentives to them to fully participate. Otherwise, who is going to report what and what kind of work we are going to report with, especially in greenhouse gases emission reductions. Governments are making commitments, but at the end of the day, governments alone cannot achieve these targets independently. Another one is to support farmers' organizations. I already mentioned that the importance that they have in numbers. Many smallholders and communities are organized around local organizations, forest and farm producer organizations, and they are an efficient vehicle how to transfer technology, exchange of experiences, and also to leverage local actions. The fourth one is to provide financial support. Sandra has already mentioned that the importance of finance, but according to some estimation, less than 2% of climate finance goes to small-scale producers. Less than 2% reaches the ground. Therefore, we cannot achieve kind of strengthen their capacities if there are no resources allocated to those small-scale producers. And finally, to develop partnerships. For capacity development, the role of governments, multilaterals, banks, NGOs are important. And if we bring together with small-scale producers, we can fill a needed gap on capacity development. To finalize, a few examples of that. And I think Johanna will present that later on. Here in FAO, together with many stakeholders, we have embarked in the process of capacity development for non-technical audience on how to make available the information and tools regarding, for example, to EXAT, to geospatial monitoring, by providing direct training to forest producer organizations. And therefore, through them, we can reach local stakeholders and to get local data. And this data can be used to fill national commitments, such as NDCs, such as reduction emission strategies, and others. And by collective action, I think we can achieve many targets. And again, the role of smallholders are important. And basically, what we can do to them is to provide the enabling conditions to unlock their capacities.
Thanks a lot.
Over.
Thanks. And thanks for bringing this link between smallholders, farmer organization, and partners at different scale. Yokolu, I'm going to now ask you a question, but before, so you are the youth expert for the Paris Committee on Capacity Building and the contact point for the NDC working group on UNGO, the youth constituency to the UNFCCC. Actually, you do a lot of other things, looking at your bio. So I would like to hear about your experience in engaging with the youth and building capacity for them, especially in this context of climate mitigation. And based also on the little poll we have, how you perceive their effectiveness in achieving climate targets compared to other actors or groups.
Yeah, so hello everyone. So my name is Yoko, part of the YOUNGO, which is a youth constituency to the UNFCCC. So within our energy mitigation working group, we actually contribute to the negotiations to the UNFCCC, and we talk with like different negotiators for mitigation, like negotiators aspect, and we also collaborate with other like working groups within YOUNGO. So we see like mitigation is not just about energy transition or just energy transition, but we also want to see like more broad-term perspectives, because mitigation is not just about energy, but like in other sectors, and how mitigation can work in ocean, like nature, like cities, and I really want to have like non-technical people to come in to really learn more about mitigation. But if the mitigation can also be a technical term on the UNFCCC, but we can also really try our best to see how like young people can be engaged to reducing carbon dioxide, for example, and commit to Paris Agreement. So with YOUNGO, we also collaborate with other youth groups, like the major group for children and youth to UNEP, from UNEP, the Iranian Environmental Program, and also the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, which is actually from like different UN entities. For example, the GYBN is from the Convention on Biological Diversity, and the major group for children and youth is also to a different UN constituencies. So it's really important to really discuss the different UN. It's not just UNFCCC. It's especially medication. It really has related to the medication, and also when it comes to climate medication, I find, well, in my personal experience, I find that so most of the medication in the process is mostly often focused in developed countries because that's where the technology and medication mechanisms lie. So I believe that's also very important for Global South also to come together with Global North, so they don't just focus in their own region, but they are also ready to look at more bigger picture in how each medication process affecting one region can also have an impact on another region. So yeah, so for negotiations, I found there's also the Article 6, which is more like carbon market. And also I think it would be really important for young people to engage in negotiations, but also at local level. From local level, it's not just really, mitigation is not really used in that perspective, but it's also really too important to see the dimension between local and international. And then, so for the second question, is the youth be more effective in achieving climate targets compared to actors? I believe yes, and then it depends actions. So if youth really effectively address their questions in a really concise and effective way, and they have a really preparation before negotiations, for example, and then it's really a good discussion. Also, when it comes to because they have their voice and they also talk to different negotiators and high-level people. So it's not really just about the top to bottom, but also the bottom to top approach. And also, of course, there's also the girls and women and the indigenous peoples from different groups, especially those that are vulnerable to the climate. Yeah, so I think by including the youth and inclusiveness and have also the intergenerational dialogue is really important, as it's not just youth who make decision making. It's not just adults who make decision making process, but also youth, since it's also youth negotiators for medication as well. So I think that's really effective when including youth to be more educated and go from there. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for pointing this thing that, yes, you can have a bidirectional engagement with negotiators, and this intergenerational dialogue is so important. So now I'm going to turn to Amanda McKee. You are the Director for Knowledge and Learning with the NDC Partnership Support Unit, and you oversee the development of knowledge product and learning activity to support NDC implementation and ambition-raising efforts across the partnership members and beyond. And so in this context, and based on your experience in the NDC partnership, in building capacity, what are the biggest challenges that you are facing, and with which actors you try to overcome them?
So I actually wanted to start and pick up on a point that Sandra mentioned, because she was alluding to the fact that we think that government officials have all the capacity, and actually our experience is that it's one of the biggest needs that they come to us with. We are a partnership. We work at the service of our country members, and countries can put in requests for support at any time. We circulate those to our members to try to match it. And about 25% of all of the requests that we receive have some sort of capacity building angle to it. So maybe not necessarily 100% focused on capacity building, but it's a part of the request. And so it is really something. First of all, it's a need, but I think more positively, it's something that government officials are seeing as a priority. And this really comes to when we look at the specific challenges. A lot of the challenges that we see in countries are around capacity to engage or coordinate. So not even just technical capacity challenges, but capacity to have interministerial and interagency coordination. That's a skill. human resource constraints are a real capacity. Also, lack of sustained capacity building support. And so oftentimes what happens is a consultant will come in, they'll fly out, they'll do the work, but there's no capacity building element that's built into that. And so the work gets done, but next time that support is needed, the country's left in the same spot as they were at the beginning. And so the ways that the partnership and our members have been responding, there's three things I wanted to highlight. The first one is really about embedding support within the government. And so a lot of the times what happens when a country comes to us for support, we might embed a specific advisor within the ministry. So this isn't a consultant who's coming and working for 3 months. It's really someone who's sitting in the ministry in the same office and reporting to our focal point. And so this is important for two reasons, because first of all, it gives the country the ownership over the work. And second of all, by having that person in the ministry, they're leaving some of their expertise behind. So even just the day-to-day conversations that you have by the water cooler, those are really important opportunities to transfer some of that knowledge. The second thing, and I alluded to this in the first point here, but through our matchmaking model, we're trying to really ensure that country needs are coming out front and center. And so encouraging partners to really respond and tailor the support that they're providing to exactly what it is that countries are looking for. And this is where it gets really complicated, because it's not just that countries need capacity building, right? We talk about it as a thing. But whether you're talking to Ministry of Environment, or whether you're talking to Finance, on the exact same topic, that capacity that's needed is extremely different. So really targeting it and tailoring it to the audience. And then the third point that I wanted to raise, we haven't touched on this much, but really kind of engaging in whole of society, whole of government, multi-actor processes. And so thinking about this not just from the national level, but all the way down to the subnational level. We talked about it with youth. I mean, these are important groups that all have individual specific needs. And so tailoring packages of support to them is critical to enable them to actually engage in this process. So I'll stop there with that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And thanks for going beyond capacity building, but understanding what is it and the specificity for a specific audience. That's where you need to tailor the offer to the demand and really anchor what you do in ministries. So I'm going to close this panel to go to Anne Kinya Mbutura online. Anne is an environment enthusiast and climate change expert and the program officer in charge of climate change and environment at the Farm Forestry Smallholder Producer Association of Kenya. So, Anne, I hope you can hear us. And I would like to hear about your experience in building capacity for smallholders, women and youth, and how this experience relates to the hurdle that we have discussed in the first question of the survey, but also that we touch during our discussion. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you so much for an opportunity this evening. I am grateful to have been a beneficiary in the FAO sponsored training to the exact tool. We have been gifted capacity on the application, and we are in the process of collecting with the Farmer Producer Organization to analyze and build evidence as a on climate change mitigation. For example, to have a tracked record of reduction in greenhouse gases, ensure energy efficient, afforestation, community activities. Communities have been really responding to us, and I will say that following a follow-up at FFSPAC, we have been able to advise on the best measures to increase the carbon while reducing the soil. In both calls for mitigation and adaptive measures, which will actually enable us to build the resilience. The most hurdles I'll say that we face would be inadequate access to finances loans and credit, the youth and women who really do not impose culture in our country's own land. Another angle is on access to education, which influences the use of technology. We are all aware that school uses a cheat. Therefore, you need a computer for you to attend these trainings and actually to conduct the GHG accounting. And some of these communities are really poor and they haven't updated such technology yet. And to institutional support, we have involved the government. I will say that there is need for more effective collaborations, especially in data sharing and information sharing. And sometimes we need to collect data from them. There is lots of bureaucracy. So there is effective communications and collaborations between government and private institutions and community grassroots organizations, and there will be better access to information, which will help in better GHG accounting and, of course, give more accurate reports. As relates to the second part of the question on the effectiveness of grassroots organizations in climate action, I'll say that the community has stakeholders. We appreciate their role, and in meetings as COP28, which are very high-end, which happen yearly, all this happen and there is no climate action at the grassroots, then we cannot be able to achieve our global targets below 1.5 degrees Celsius. So in short, what I'm saying is that we continuously, number one, need to develop the capacities of communities in order to achieve and build the climate resilience that we all want. And the second, I would say that we need more experts trained, both in the government, institutions, and in the private sector, and among all the communities, especially the youth and the women. And we should begin popularizing the tool and do monitoring and evaluation, measurement, verification, and reporting, which will help our country do a good report and accurate report on the NPCs as required under UNFCCC. Again, we can also do innovative solutions that integrate digital knowledge. We all know that communities have a lot of traditional knowledge that could be really be used even in management of their farms and even improving management and land management. And finally, I would encourage collaboration and contribution of communities towards development of policies. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for showing this example coming from communities, and that also pointing to communities need capacity building, but still also governments need also training. So there's a lot of things to do, but with communities, we can also embed local knowledge in some of this assessment. So we are reaching the end of this session, but we still have a small segment, and I really want to give the floor for a few minutes to my colleague, Joanna, that is the coordinator of the exact unit in the Agri-Food Economics and Policy Division at FAO that I have the pleasure to lead. And has worked on a number of partnerships, done a number of training with Anne, with Jose. So Joanna, I will give you 4 minutes to give us a snapshot on the concrete experience that and the service you are delivering.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased today to share our journey in delivering effective capacity building on the use of the EXACT tool for estimating carbon benefits through agriculture interventions. First, let me say a few words about EXACT. So EXACT is simply a quite comprehensive and freely available tool for assessing greenhouse gas emissions across the agricultural sector.
Joanna, we don't see your slides, so I think You want to show slides, no? So let me
You
check.
don't see my slide because
Maybe
I
the
see it
technical team, if you can show the slide. Okay, perfect.
because
Thanks.
I see it shared on the screen. So is it okay now?
Yes, perfect.
Thank you. So EXACT stands out for covering a broad range of activities from ranging from AFOLU to use of inputs and energy or infrastructure construction in agriculture. But it also stands out for its alignment with the latest scientific evidence and user-friendly design, making greenhouse gas assessments accessible to all. Our team has conducted trainings in over 50 countries across the world, and these trainings were tailored to diverse groups like government bodies, academic institutions, project teams, as well as farmer organizations. A key challenge that we have found when delivering these trainings has been addressing the varied expertise levels in G&G accounting, and as well as different computer skills. A notable example that I would like to mention today, and that has been also already mentioned before by Jose, is our work with the Forest and Farm Facility Program, where we trained over 250 representatives from more than 50 farmer associations across 8 countries. These trainings aimed to empower farmers to recognize and demonstrate the carbon mitigation potential of their practices to potential investors. We started off with virtual trainings as the pandemic necessitated a shift to virtual trainings, and we aimed at blending live online sessions with offline hands-on assignments. This approach had many benefits, but also many challenges, particularly in engaging participants individually. We attempted to mitigate this by having local facilitators and combining online sessions delivered by us with in-person setting for the participants, which proved more effective yet not perfect. And indeed, we learned that the fully in-person training significantly enhanced learnings, especially when complemented by practical exercises, but practical exercises that are taken from the day-to-day life of participants. For instance, in our recent training in Kenya, we integrated field visits into our training, allowing participants to apply their learning in real-world scenarios, deepening their understanding of data collection and G&G accounting. What we have learned through our experience is that participants often have varied knowledge levels, and that recognizing champions among participants and engaging them in helping others is the key to bridging knowledge gaps during the trainings. These champions, by assisting others, they help enormously in ensuring that the training maintains a consistent pace and that everyone grasps the material presented. Last but not least, any effective capacity building requires full engagement and long-term commitment, and that's something that also has been mentioned already in the panel. We need to ensure that participants are fully immersed in the training during the training, so they must be away from their regular work environment, and that's really critical for effective learning. But what's even more critical is that these trainings have to be seen not as a one-off event, but as the beginning of a long-term engagement where the skills are continuously practiced and refined. And in conclusion, I wanted to mention that our experience with capacity building using the EXACT tool underscores the importance of adaptive, hands-on approaches and engagement strategies that are tailored to varied expertise levels, and a commitment to long-term skill development. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jana, and thanking for showing how a tool that is actually a pretty sophisticated tool, but bring to the user through an Excel interface and tomorrow through an online interface can be used by communities, and combining online training with on-site training and with a concrete example, you can reach not only experts, but also farmers and representatives of farmer organizations. And as you said, And as it had been said, capacity building is a long-run game. We cannot underestimate this. Building capacities to influence the climate discussion, that also has our long-run game to some extent, unfortunately. It's pretty important. So since we are already at the end of this session, we are not going to have an open Q&A, but I will be happy that you engage online with our colleagues or some of the panelist members today or in the coming days. And I will just conclude by a small round of applause for our speakers. Thank you very much. And you also deserve them because you have done all the quiz. So thanks a lot, and hope to continue this discussion. Bye-bye.